The next question is, what is your stance on relations with jurisdictions who don't recognize Prince Hall? Very worshipful Brother Beers.
I think it's very important that we maintain relations with jurisdictions that don't recognize Prince Hall, so that we maintain a seat at the table to help advocate and create that recognition. At this point in society, it's personally embarrassing that our fraternity, which is based upon brotherly love, relief, and truth, wouldn't recognize another brother organization. But I also recognize that our entire fraternal structure is based on the concept of recognition. So we have to be respectful of the customs and traditions of these other organizations. So with specific respect to Prince Hall, I think that we, as a jurisdiction and individual lodges, should proactively continue to build our relationships with our Prince Hall brothers here within our jurisdiction. And if a Prince Hall jurisdiction would like us to help advocate for them with their Grand Lodge jurisdiction, we should then assist with that. But it should be at their request, and it should be in partnership. So as much as I would like to perhaps take a stronger stance, I think the most important piece is that we maintain a seat at the table so that we can be the voice of reason and we can continue to advocate for this direction. Thank you.
Brother Coffman.
Thank you. One of our ancient landmarks is that there is one Grand Lodge, recognized Grand Lodge in any particular geographic area, unless the one that we've already recognized also recognizes co-jurisdiction. That is what we did here with our Prince Hall Grand Lodge, and has been done in many, many other locations. However, I believe that we need to continue to recognize the Grand Lodge that we have always recognized and encourage, as Brother Beers indicated, encourage the Grand Lodges that do not recognize the Prince Hall that are in their territorial jurisdiction to do so, and continuing to meet with them and converse with them and encourage them to recognize the Prince Hall would be, I believe, in the would better our fraternity and make us all stronger in the long run. Thank you.
Very worshipful Brother Wood.
This is really a, I can answer this from my own personal experience because I dealt with this not long ago. The corporation that I work for, we get to travel a lot. And also we have what we call engineers that travel within the corporation when we're doing major upgrades. And I had a very good friend of mine from Georgia come up. He worked for the corporation. He's a Mason. And one day I said to him, "Hey, George, let's get together and go to Lodge tomorrow." And he said, "Hey, that'd be great." And I mentioned to him, I says, "Hey, make sure you bring some white gloves with you." And then he asked, "Why?" And I said, "Well, we're going to Prince Hall." And he looked me straight in the face and said, "I'd love to go with you, brother, but I can't." And I asked him why. He said, "Because if I went to lodge up here to a Prince Hall Lodge, I'd be in trouble with my jurisdiction down in Georgia." And I said, "So, I understand where you're coming from." And for that reason, I said, "Hey, I'm sorry." And I believe we have to respect what other jurisdictions do and how they want to acknowledge or not acknowledge Prince Hall. But as I told my friend, I said, "You know what? I hope someday your grand jurisdiction changes its mind and acknowledges Prince Hall, so that we can go to lodge together up here and not have to run the risk of you doing something that's against what your jurisdiction says." Because he would have gotten in trouble if he had went. And I think it's wrong, because I firmly believe, when we close the lodge, we're asked, how shall we meet, act, and part? We're all on the level. We're all God's creation, and we all love each other, and therefore, as far as I'm concerned, there should be no barriers. But as a member of this grand jurisdiction, if I went down to Georgia, I would not go to a Prince Hall Lodge because it would be an insult to them. So I think we have to be careful on where we travel and what we do, and respect what that jurisdiction acknowledges or does not acknowledge. It's a shame that, you know, all the jurisdictions in the United States do not acknowledge, you know, Prince Hall as such. But all we can do is encourage them when we go to the Grand Conference of Masters, to encourage them to change their thinking. But you know, change is a very, very hard thing to do in Masonry. Thank you.
Very worshipful Tupper.
The concept of exclusive jurisdiction is an American invention. It started on the East Coast in the 1700s when the Grand Lodge of Philadelphia, or Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, chartered lodges in New York, and New York didn't like it, so they made an agreement that they wouldn't do it, and then they immediately went and chartered a lodge in Massachusetts, which caused some more problems. But the concept of exclusive jurisdiction got going, and it made it so that there was one major Grand Lodge in every state in the United States. Prince Hall, when they formed the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, African Lodge, was ignored. And so Prince Hall, who was the master of that lodge, and was chartered from the Grand Lodge of England, got together and they began their own system of lodges because they had to. And out of that grew the Prince Hall system. Now, the other Grand Lodges, the ones that we belong to, got our Grand Lodges in each state, as well as you know, the other places that we have our lodges, like Hawaii at that time. Each one had one. Prince Hall has not gone that route, and it's caused problems even on this coast. Not too many years ago, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Oregon and Idaho was recognized by Idaho, but not by Oregon. So Oregon de-recognized Idaho. That was a lot of fun for a year until they finally got with it and they recognized them down in Oregon. In 1898, this Grand Lodge was petitioned by two black Masons to recognize them as Masons. We did so. They were Prince Hall Masons. Overnight, this Grand Lodge was outlawed by most of the Grand Lodges in North America, and we had to rescind that at the next Grand Lodge. Finally, we all began to recognize them as things picked up. And it's gotten to the point now where there are only, I believe, 8 Grand Lodges that do not recognize Prince Hall. So we do not recognize Prince Hall in those jurisdictions because it would be a violation of their jurisdictional right. It has to remain that way because that's the way Freemasonry is in this country. And I look forward to the day when their Grand Lodges recognize the Prince Hall Grand Lodges in their jurisdiction so that we can recognize them and we can visit there. Thank you.